Okay, so yeah, I often use scripts in my work. I've got a bunch that I've already installed here. Um, the installation options for these are usually quite simple. I can cover that briefly here. So I've got my downloads folder, and let's see. So I'm just going to clean up my folder a bit. So this thing, for example, this is called SP Paint 3D. Essentially, there's two folders here that I copy into Documents, Maya 2017, and you see there's a Preferences and a Scripts folder. So usually these scripts you just have to copy in. Usually the Preferences contains icons of some kind, and the Scripts contains the actual script that runs the tool. A lot of times they'll come with README files if you're downloading them. My main source for this stuff is High-End 3D. I find it's just got the biggest, best catalog of tools, and I actually have favorited a bunch here. So there's some that I use for just flattening surfaces or aligning them to kind of a flat plane. There's some really cool ones that generate like different textures and patterns, like hexagon patterns and whatnot. So it's really great for making all sorts of cool, quick sci-fi stuff. Oftentimes has these sort of patterns. One thing I recommend though when you're looking at these tools, so this is where Free Paint, SP Paint is. It's got its own instructions usually on the site, so you want to follow those closely or check to see if they include that, something like this. Sometimes there's a README file, a text file. This is an HTML file, so it'll open, it'll sort of tell you about its features, it'll tell you how to install it, right? In most cases, it's just a matter of finding that ML script, generally speaking. So this one I've already copied into the Documents window, into 2017 scripts, right? And these have to be loaded into Maya before you start. So when you want to launch this, you want to go to the script editor in the bottom right corner, or you can go to, literally just go to the command line here. So there's Mel, and you can switch between Mel and Python. Some scripts run in Python language, some in Mel. And you just simply paste whatever the instructions are. You don't want to put the full name of the script. It's usually the full name without the .mel, and then a semicolon. And you can hit enter, and it'll actually launch the script. So that's kind of the quick way to do it from the lower left side. If you want to actually launch the script or save it into your sort of custom shelf here. So I've got the modeling shelf that I've made. You can select the script name or the script execute command, go to File, Save Script to Shelf. I've already done this, but I'll just redo it again. Just call it Paint. So with that shelf open, I've got this modeling shelf open of mine. Say OK, and you see it has that option there now. So every time I click on this, it'll launch the tool. And if you really want, you can right-click and go to Edit, go to Shelves, and then you can change the icon, which I did in this case. So I clicked on the little brown folder icon, and that launches the window, and I can just pick one of the, I just grabbed one of the icons that's actually part of the interface to use it as a button. And then you can say Save All Shelves. It saves the button. In this case, I'm going to delete the duplicate that I don't want. So what's great about this is if we've got a few different objects here, sphere, cylinder, sure. Take the cylinder size down a little bit, or maybe the sphere I'll just make a lot larger. Kind of move it over here. So what I'll do is I'll go to Modeling, Object Paint. So I want to paint one object onto another. I'm going to actually say Add. So the cone will be the paint with object, and then I'll select the sphere and hit Add to target surfaces. And what's great about this now is if I hit paint mode, right, I can kind of drag and drop these guys onto the surface. So, now I've got these objects being placed. What's cool about this too is you can randomize, let's say, the scale, so 1 to 5 times bigger. So you get big and small depending. You can randomize rotation. You can randomize, different aspects of this. So it's really great for placing like nuts and bolts. Really great for placing all sorts of like little detail, repetitive objects on a surface. And you can set these to instances or duplicates. So if you want an instance, it'll, you know, if you change one, it'll change them all. Okay, so I'll hit W just to clear that. So I want to show you one other thing. So one other issue with this is that this is all based on pivot points. So if the pivot is still in the center, that pivot will be, that's roughly where the mesh will appear from this point and above. So you typically do want to pull the pivot down towards the object's kind of base at the bottom. So if I just remove this and re-add it, go back to paint mode, right, it's now actually grabbing this thing from approximately that base point. So you're seeing more of the cone show up. So by the way, you can keep moving the stroke around as well. There's a distance threshold. I mean, there's a bunch of different options we can play with. So you can kind of check different options as well for this thing. But place is a little different. What it allows you to do is kind of grab and move along the surface. And when you find a spot where you like this thing to be, you can let go of your left click option. So it's kind of like an interactive placement method. So this is really good on, again, like I said, mechanical stuff it works great for. I'll create kind of a simple box, I guess. Yeah, let's just grab all of the faces, I suppose. We'll do an extrude. Let's see, keep faces together, off, divisions way down. Divisions off, do an offset. There we go. Then maybe I'll do a local Z here. Another little offset. Okay, so again, just to kind of go back to this wire painter thing, I'll go with the cylinder. I'm going to create a simple kind of bolt with a washer. Let's go 8 divisions, or maybe 6. There we go. Height of 0.2, let's say. Oops, not radius, but height. 0.5. Then I'll create a cylinder, doing roughly the same thing here. Give it a height of 0.5 or 0.2. Place this below, just so that there's enough contact. Increase the radius a bit. And one thing to mention too, you know, these things, because they probably are going to get repeated a lot, you know, you may want to delete the faces that are not seen. This is something that I will often do, is really try to optimize, especially like, you know, once I had to build like a boiler for an environment, and it had all these little rivets. So it had all these little spheres that went around everywhere to make it look like it was all bolted together. That crashed my scene the first time I did it. I made like 2 million polys just on all the little rivets. And I think it's because the original sphere, I had the full sphere and I squashed it. I should have deleted half, which would have cut the poly count in half. I could have gotten away with a lot lower poly mesh. So for example, if I were to use this as a little like riveting system, I'd probably go with 8 by 8. If I were to do it now, that's exactly how I'd do it. 64 polys on this, I would delete half. Right? And then take this guy, squash it down. And then, what else? So I'm at 32 polys, right? So the thing about this is, if this is a tiny rivet, chances are you won't see it up until, you might see it at this distance, right? So does that look round enough? Yeah, probably. If you do know you need a close-up, then you may want to plan for maybe potentially smoothing that. So if I smooth it, it looks good on close-up, right? It's one of the reasons I go with 8-sided cylinders. Or, yeah, I think this was an 8-division sphere. So 8 divisions on a sphere, 8-sided cylinders smooth really well. So if you do need a close-up of that at some point, it will smooth fairly cleanly. Not only that, but if I'm looking at very close, you see it's very segmented. Well, if I just go mesh display, soften edge, it kind of does this fake smooth, right? Where it blends the shadows and highlights to make it look smoother than it actually is. So, you know, when you have a lot of tiny repetitions like that, think about the scale, think about what is actually going to be seen and when it'll be seen. So you can optimize. So I'm going to delete the back face of this thing as well. it's never going to be seen, and it's going to save me a lot of polys, right? So I'll take these two, I'm going to combine them. Again, if I go, let's say, to a front left view, that should be okay. I'm going to hit D on my keyboard. So let me grab this, hit D on the keyboard. And I'm going to just drop this thing so it's maybe just resting a little bit above the very, very bottom of the object. So again, back to the paint window. Object Painter. I've got the box selected, so I'm going to make this the paint on. The scale of this thing is a little large, so I'm going to go in. Oh, by the way, I should probably unwrap stuff. You know, I kind of, you guys are going to be a little bit tortured by this, but yeah, we haven't done UVs yet. So UVs are pretty much the same as last year. The tools are a little bit differently laid out. There's an unfold section now. There's a bunch of these different sections, but a lot of the same stuff still applies. So I'm going to go to arrange and layout and just simply hit layout, and this thing is already pretty much unwrapped, right? It's a cylinder and a basic actually two basic cylinders with slightly different shapes. So that's kind of a quick way to pack this part together. So one last thing, I want the scale to kind of match the rest of this stuff, so I'm going to grab both these pieces and scale scale proportionally down. Since I'm scaling in the polygon level, which is a sub-object level, I should probably go back and check to make sure my pivot point is where it ought to be. So let's go back to object mode. Sure enough, the pivot's a little too low now, so I'm going to just nudge it back up. And we'll go to perspective. So this will be added to the geometry. By the way, I should, again, I'm always kind of bad for this. I should, maybe check my mesh, delete history, right? Especially before you do mass duplications, it's a good idea to kind of keep stuff clean. So I'll do that right now. So we'll add this. And now I should go to paint, right? We take a look. So, right, it's very easy to drop this stuff in. Yeah, I'm going to go, I guess, right to the corners on this guy. I could probably use place as well, since I probably want to be a little more precise. So, yeah, hopefully that helps you guys out, right? It's nice and easy to kind of go in and add these embellishing features so quickly now, It's really such a great tool. And you can think of this as well. If you had a tree, a bunch of rocks, a bunch of different pieces of wood, you can randomize the scale of those things so that they all look a little different. They all orient and rotate a little differently. So you can do a max-min rotation. In most cases, it'd probably just be on the Y, which is the green in this case, right? X, Y, Z. Top, middle, bottom. And what's also awesome about this is that this thing just snaps right to the angle as well. So if you're on a slope, right? It'll match that slope to fit it in. So again, really, really love these tools. I think it's just such a time saver. I mean, imagine before, hand placing each one, duplicating, rotating, and this will save you a ton of time, And for a simple box, this looks a hell of a lot better. So yeah, you may notice like there are groups and stuff. So what you can do is once all this stuff is placed, let me just get out of draw mode. Chances are, because I want this to be one object, usually I want it combining. I'm not a big fan of grouping stuff. That's my personal preference, but I find combining is in a lot of ways a little more effective than grouping because you can get access to the UVs very quickly. So this is now technically one object, but it's left behind all these kind of transform nodes and stuff. So again, usually when you're done a mesh, when you delete by history, it clears all those extra groups. Because everything in Maya is node-based, right? So when you create an object, then you alter its positioning, its rotation. It's actually two separate nodes. There's an object node, there's a material node, there's a transform node. And I think what's happening with the object painter is that it's actually creating an extra, so a second transform node on top. And that's why you get these weird groupings. But once you combine, clear history, it clears out the garbage, right? So that keeps your scene nice and neat and tidy. So yeah, somebody asked, to see this again. So let me just take a different example. I'm going to remove this guy. add this rivet. Again, maybe I should scale this down. I can kind of do this from here as well, so maybe I'll just take the radius down to like 0.5. But that screws up my scaling, so yeah, I'll go into face mode, just scale the whole thing down. The reason I'm going into the sub-object mode and just not grabbing the object is because I don't know that it's going to translate well. Plus, your UVs may not carry over correctly either. But I do need to check the pivot in object mode to make sure it's sitting in the right spot. And you can add more than one object to the paint, by the way. So it doesn't just have to be the one object. You can add multiple paint twos. You can add multiple targets. So it's simply a matter of selecting the object you want to paint with, going to add, and then the object you want to paint onto and hitting add. So I should remove the old one. It actually changed names because of the way I grouped everything, I guess. So now if I go to paint, right, it'll paint these guys out. And I think, yeah, I can't remember. I think it's a threshold. Maybe I set this down to 1 because I'm on a small scale. You see I can just stroke across the surface as well. It's pretty cool, right? So if you're on a tiny scale, again, I should be working more real world, but you can paint across. So keep in mind, right? Random scale, 1 to 5. Random rotation, usually I go -45 or -90 to +90. And you get some cool stuff, right? So you can do things that way, or if you want to just place, it'll place. But again, I've got my randomizations on, right? So usually I do like random rotation, especially if it's nuts and bolts and things like that, because they should never all be perfectly rotated the exact same way, right? They should all be a little different. It's part of the little kind of chaos that happens in reality, right? Is when people put, I forget the name of it. I've used it actually in a machine shop, but there. So I can place these guys wherever across here. You know, if you need to duplicate them, you can just do duplicate special or do a mirror if you want. And you can also snap to vertices. There's a bunch of options that you can play with in this thing, but yeah.